All right, hey guys, it's time to get started with the fifth part to the building and environmental analysis dashboard. So this week, um, we are going to start bringing in um, this data or these charts, and we're going to allow them to interact with the user interface portion we have been building up. So the user interface is not done, but I figured we could start to look at how these items are being connected, so that anyone following along or watching can progress at their own rate, which will probably be much faster than I am progressing. Um, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take these um, dashboard or these charts that Jake and our Ontario put together, and I'm going to begin to look at the inputs that they need and see how we can attach that to our user interface. So I'm going to start with the monthly average hourly temps chart. And that is this chart right here. And this really just allows you to see the time and the month. So it really gives you a good sense of, at least when you're designing a building, that during this time of the year, you're going to need to think about shading devices or um, other things. So I'm just going to copy this over to my graph. It's not hard, I guess, to remake, but in order to save some time, we're going to bring this over. All right, so I'm going to paste that. All right, so now that we have this on our canvas, I want to see what what inputs are needed. And please excuse the sniffling. I am a little bit sick. So let's add that title to the group so that it's not showing up awkward. Add this to the group. Most likely don't need this information, but it's always helpful to have. All right, so right here we have our analysis period. We know that this is our analysis period information, and I don't have to go through that panel. I can always create a relay, my favorite component ever, as I've said before, and this is probably a cleaner way to do it. Bring that into here. So now the analysis period panel is just giving us our readout so we can verify this information from the UI is updating as seen, and then just taking that relay component um, straight into the monthly average hourly temp charts. So the next piece of data we need is the annual hourly data. So that's going to be the dry bulb temperature that we're going to use. And so um, this output, we're also um, affecting, or we have a component in the UI that's affecting that data as well. So that comes down to here, and there's a stream filter depending on if it's Celsius or if it's a Fahrenheit value. And so out of this stream filter is the result. So we can come up here, we can grab this, label that CF temp, and or yeah, temp. And now we can add this information to the annual hourly data. And wow, look at that. We get a pretty cool graph here. Um, let's see what else we need. Um, we also, let's look back at the graph that Jake sent over. All right, so the input data. Alrighty, so it looks like that is all we need for this chart. And just for fun, I'm gonna want to see if the analysis period is working. So that does work, which is pretty nice. Um, let's see, I'm gonna change this from like 8 in the morning till um, 4. All right, so now that we have this graph, let's see if we can get it projected onto the heads-up display, um, because that graph actually lives inside of the 3D modeling environment, which is not what we want. Um, we want it to live in whatever um, viewport that you are working in. Um, excuse me. So let's take the project. What is that component? Hmm. We will find it. Display, preview. All right. I guess I have them render mesh to screen. All right. So we're gonna hide that object. So we're gonna grab this mesh. Um, just checking all the inputs to see what we need. Scale with viewport, and then location. I believe we need a point. So we'll construct a point here. All right. Correct. So I'm gonna just grab this component, copy it, and bring it here. And that is wonderful. Alrighty. Let's see what's going on here. All right, scale factor. There we go. Now it's showing up. The scale factor was just off a little bit. So let me remove that component. Let me turn off the windrows that we made before. And now let's reposition this component or this graph. All right. So select, beautiful. It's interesting as you continue to rotate, it appears as if this graph is intersecting with geometry when we all know it's not. Um, but anyways, so you can now see that we have that graph as a static object on that viewport. So let's begin to add the text that we would like, and then also add the legend. All right. So the legend is going to be a mesh as well. So we should be able to just drag that over, plain and simple. Maybe scale that down again. All right, and let's see. It'd be great if we could change this, the opacity. I don't think we can currently, but we can look at that um, later on. All right, so let's keep moving. Let's grab some of that, uh, the information. Let's see what we have here coming out of this graph. All right, so the title, it's all mesh objects, title base point, data points, graph curves, nothing coming out of there, legend base point. All right, so let's see. All right, so there we have the title. However, I'm not sure that we really want to have all that information duplicated. Um, so I'm trying to figure out how or what the best way would to be or to kind of parse this data um, to get the information that we want, since everything coming out of this um, title is a mesh object. Um, I'm assuming that each mesh object is a letter. So if I plug that in here, let's turn that off. Yep. So that becomes a little problematic because I, I don't necessarily want to like shift the list to remove certain items just because the title is going to be changing, depending on the location, and depending the on the analysis period. So I could reverse the list potentially, and then grab the analysis period info to display here. Um, but really, the information I don't want is the Sacramento. And so the location, whereas the title of the graph and the analysis period, um, actually those two, the analysis period and the location can um, be removed since those are, uh, I guess, that's global information, whereas the dry bulb temperature is describing that local graph. Um, and that could change, but in this, I don't believe that it will change in this configuration. So I can cheat 49. So I can cheat, take that information out by shifting the list. I don't want that to wrap. Shift it. I can't remember if it's shifting up or down. 50. Reverse that. Okay. For each. All right. So this is going to be 43, I believe, or not. Apparently, I'm not sure of the logic here. All right, so I'm shifting that list to pull out that information based on the assumption that the length of the local description is not going to change. However, if that Description does change given that these are all mesh objects. Um, then the title will probably end up um, getting messed up. But for now, this will serve its purpose. Preview that off, scale factor. And so now we have that that graph up here, drivable temperature, um, giving you um, the units, um, and then removing that unnecessary information that we'll have duplicated later on. Anyways, so as we change this information, and you can see that's going to update. So now it gives you Celsius information, um, which is pretty handy, definitely. Now one thing that we want to do is be able to turn this chart off. So the hourly temp chart is not selected. So let's see how we can do that. So most of these components have a run it um, input. I'm not sure if that's just something I can add. I think I'm gonna have to add the actual source code in there, but we can always just try. Let's see if that's, sorry, capitalized. Run it. I don't believe this is gonna do anything. Let's see. All right. This is going to probably be something I have to dig into later. Um, and there's probably a better or a easier way just to get around that. Um, just by disconnecting that data. So if we do a stream gate, then we should probably be able to, our stream filter probably. Yeah, then we should be able to switch that using this information. So we are going to want to use index 1. Yes. So what I'm going to do is the chart types, that's going to be a fixed number. So I can take a list um, item component and zoom in here, and I can add um, 3 more outputs. And so what this is going to allow me to do is it's going to allow me to pull out each index from this list. That is incorrect. There we go. So now, if I duplicate this, I can see that this is a false value. Well, I guess they're all going to be false, but now you can see that index 1, which is hourly temps, is also item 1 here. And then when I toggle this, it becomes true or false. So if I plug this value into that filter component, uh, now that toggles on and off. label all this so it's easy to navigate later on. Well, that's all right. So I'm going to take that. I'm just going to keep those together. It's a little redundant, but it helps keep all this information organized. We're going to group that into that monthly average hourly temps chart group. And then just turn off the preview. Not that it really matters, um, but just to make everything a little cleaner. And remove that panel as we don't need that one. Alrighty, so let's look back at this dashboard information. So we have, the windrows information, and then we have the sun path diagram, and then percent comfort or not. So let's hit the windrows temp. Let's take this chart. I'm going to take the param viewer with it, just so that I think really what we're trying to do is we're taking the windrows with temps chart, or windrows chart, and we're mapping it with temperature. So the rings describe the time or the amount of wind, whereas the color describes the temperature. Um, so I'm just going to copy this over. Then I'm going to clean it up a little bit just by adding this to the group, adding this information to the group, bring this over here. Now you might think it's funny that I'm being so particular about organizing the components, but it is an important thing to do when you're working in a firm with more than one user, just because it helps other people navigate what you're doing. So um, the cleaner you can make your scripts, the better, so that people inside or outside your organization can navigate and relatively easy navigate, understand what you're doing, what you're trying to do. Um, all right, so let's plug in this information again. Um, so we want to grab the analysis period, which is right here. Plug that in to the analysis period input. And then we're going to want to grab that north arrow or north adjustment. So this is default 0. Currently we have no north adjustment indicated, so it's still going to be 0, but it's nice to have in there. North adjustment, let's double click that line, right click, and then title this. And now I'll bring that over to here. All right. And now we're looking for the hourly wind direction. We'll grab that from this component, which is the import EPW file, wind direction. Hourly wind speed. And then we need annual hourly data, which I believe is going to be the monthly average hourly temps chart. But let me check back here. Annual hourly data is not that. Oh, it's just the regular dry bulb temp information. I was thinking it's too complicated. It's too simple. Um, so if we take this information and we plug that into the annual hourly data, run this, wait a little while so that it will load, and then you get a beautiful little diagram that almost looks like it's placed perfectly. Um, but yes. So what we're going to now want to do is we're going to want to hook this true toggle up to the windrows um, check box. So let's see, they're false. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to take windrows, which is index 2. We're going to throw it into that input, which is the run it input. And now when we select that box, um, that is going to run this chart or initiate the chart. There we go. And so um, you can see that we have two charts. This is the original chart, um, and then this is our modified chart for hourly data with dry bulb temperature. So we don't want both per se. So I'm gonna grab just this um, mesh, and so that's why I grabbed this param viewer so that we could see that there's two different branches in this data tree. So if we draw the tree, there's just two branches. Um, yes, so I'm going to want to just take the second graph, which will be that um, first branch, I guess, branch index 1. I'm not sure if that's still an index value, but anyways, we're going to go for that one. Um, and I'm not sure math. There we go, sets, tree. All right, split tree, stream gate. Beautiful. All right, I believe that is the best way to go about it, or not. Yeah, definitely not the right way to go about it. Let's see what this component is doing. Alrighty, so okay, this is not actually what we're wanting. We'll probably want it. All right, so there we go. So we can clean this list, which might not be necessary, so that we're only getting the lines, because we don't need the mesh objects here. We're just looking to grab these lines so that we project them or can project them onto the viewport. Let's go back to top view. It's a lot better. All right, so now you can see I'm just selecting that object. So we'll do this same exact operation for all of the items that we need. Alrighty, mesh. I'm gonna hide that preview, and we're gonna figure out here what each object is doing. Turn that preview off at that point. Alrighty, Windrose mesh. There we go. So that's the mesh value there. We shouldn't need to clean that. And then let's grab that legend. There we go. So let's begin with those three items and start projecting that information to the screen. Mesh to screen, and I'm going to take that mesh, delete that panel, take this point component, add that to the location, and we're going to take this scale component and also add it there. And now we get to try to find it. There we go. It's so fun. All right, we're gonna have to take this to 1000. -1000. Take that to 0. And now scale this up. Make it the same scale. 0.38. It's definitely not the same scale. Um, Trying to get these legends to match up pretty closely. It's kind of the goal. I want these things to kind of make sense when they're next to each other. Looked pretty good. Alrighty, so let's hide this information. And I'm just hitting the center mouse wheel, center button, in order to get this quick menu that I can then disable the preview for all of that. So now let's project the curves to screen. Render curve to screen. So we're going to take that information, take the location and the scale. I'm going to hide that, all those objects. And now we get a fancy, actually a pretty ugly color. So I'm going to grab a color swatch component, put that into the input, color input, then modify this to a dark gray. I think I've said it before, but I'm not a huge fan of using black. And so that's what we're going to use. So now you can see, zoom selected, that this information is all live in the viewport. Zoom extents. And now this will overlay on the geometry so you can get a good understanding at whatever scale of geometry, I guess where the direction's coming from or where your wind is coming from. Cool. Let's start adding the legend info here. Grab mesh component. The title. Alrighty. So let's turn this preview on. Let's see where this information is coming from. So that information is probably coming from this branch. There we go. All right. So I'm going to want the north to south, east-west information, but I don't want these meshes here. So let's pull out a panel. All this information should stay the same, so we can index this out. All right. So let's shift this list. Hopefully it's relatively organized. How many items are in this list? 50, 25. Alrighty. Beautiful. All right. So let's take those mesh objects, add them here, drag this out. And then organize this. Alrighty. And now we can hide all that. Beautiful. Um, Now we have that information. I think I want to change. I'm not a huge fan of this space here, so the organization of these graphs is probably going to change a little bit over time. But as I continue to change that, you'll definitely be updated and you'll see it in the weeks to follow. And we're also going to release the script, so whoever's watching can use it. Um, we don't want to hoard these tools and see them as a differentiator, but really just a tool that everyone's using. So if we can help you guys out, that's what we'll do. Um, I guess I'll grab the title now, which is probably mesh objects. Yep, wonderful. Let's see what information we want. So we definitely want it'd be great to have the windrows and hourly data wind speed. However, cutting out this information can become problematic unless I do like a character count location. Alrighty, So for now, I'm just going to grab the windrows because I know that's not going to change. And then um, add that to this graph on the viewport. And once again, I'm using these branch components in order to just get that first branch, second graph. Um, so let's shift this list so that we're only getting the windrows component. $400 should be good. Alrighty. Then we're gonna send that out to the mesh. And then hide the shift list component. And so now we have those two projected onto our viewport, and then they're both connected into the user interface. So I can um, change this, which will add or subtract to those charts. I can change the analysis period, which will update the charts and also shift them, which I'll have to troubleshoot. And I can also change the temperature units, which will also change the legend readings. So the next thing to do is really just to keep adding this information, organizing it appropriately, probably not the way I have organized it, and then as well as adding an option so that users can select their location from this user interface. So as we've said before, we want this to be as friendly as possible so people don't have to come in here and struggle with um, all this information that's connected. They don't realize that each piece has just slowly been added, and it's really not that scary. But in order to avoid that, we literally want them just to be able to um, open up the Grasshopper file, just toggle Boolean to true, or potentially leave that toggle to true. So when they open it, the heads-up display, HumanUI user interface just automatically launches, giving them just control um, here, removing them from the frightening spaghetti mess that you have in Grasshopper, and just giving them a nice user experience. So with that, um, I am going to sign off. So if you have any questions, go ahead, comment on the video, write us at HMC Architects, um, or call the Sacramento office. Um, and let us know if you have questions or if you want the file. For all internal users, we'll be posting all this information on Echo as always. And that's all I have for now. So until next time, have a good rest of the week and weekend. All right, guys.